Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs. Nick, week 6 of the NFL, how are you feeling about it?
I thought it was good, Dom. I thought, another week in the books, hopefully another fantasy win. I think it's really picking up some steam.
Well, I had my NFL regular season debut for TalkSport 2, so I was locked into the Ravens-Commanders game, which was a really, really good game. And actually what I said at the time was we had a shorter 6 o'clock window, obviously, because we had the international game. So we only had 5 or 6 p.m. slots. And there were some really, really good games in there. So in this episode of the pod, we're going to talk about the Bears-Jags, the second London game, obviously. We're going to talk about that Ravens-Commanders game because I think that was a really, really good game. And we're also going to cover the Lions-Cowboys game, which I'm really, really excited to talk about because I think we've got a lot of things to take away from that game. And then we're going to end up with the same thing that we ended up with last week, same thing we ended the pod with last week, which is the hot seat. But I think now things are starting to heat up for certain teams that we really weren't going to talk about in last week's episode. So while it is a bit of a repeat, we're not going to have the same names on there. So, we had the Bears-Jags to kick off the weekend slate at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium between Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence. One quarterback definitely came out on top. The other very much did not.
Well, Dom, I think that is very much true. But I think if you watch the game, I do not think Trevor Lawrence necessarily lost the game for the Jags. He had a few bad interceptions, a few bad plays, but the onus has to fall on Doug Peterson, who, a bit of a spoiler alert, I feel like we might talk about later for the hot seat. The Jaguars beat themselves in this game. There's one drive in the third quarter, driving down the field, 3 4th down stops, penalty. This team was playing against themselves all game. Don't get me wrong, Caleb Williams did have a good game. 4 touchdowns is nothing to turn your nose up at. And Keenan Allen, great game. Cole Kmet, great game. It really felt like the whole offense clicked. But you've got to beat that Jags team. That Jags team is absolutely abysmal.
I completely agree. I think that at the moment, the Jags are a team which lacks discipline, cohesiveness, and any semblance of chemistry. I mean, we spoke last week, about the Jets offense lacking some chemistry with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. This Jags team, it literally looks like they've called up 11 blokes on offense, 11 blokes on defense from random places and just said, hey, mate, can you play today? Can you still suit them up? The showing from both sides of the ball, I think, was just frankly unacceptable. It looked unprofessional is how I would actually surmise it. It just looked unprofessional. They looked lost and undisciplined. There was Devin Lloyd when he went on that first touchdown against Cole Kmet. He gave up that touchdown in coverage and just jogged back to Cole Kmet, who was trying to break a tackle at the goal line. And that's kind of a metaphor for this Jags team at the moment, which is definitely why we're going to talk about the Jags front office in the hot seat segment later in the podcast. But I think before we speak about the Bears, we just have to talk about what the hell is going on in Jacksonville with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they're in a real kind of pickle now. They usually use these London games as the get right games. They certainly did last year, and we know how their season ended in the end. But nevertheless, it's kind of kick-started a bit of life into their season. Now it's almost the reverse. The Jags are in a terrible spot where they have to stay in London with a coach who's clearly not going to work out. Their season is definitely over. And they're essentially staring down the barrel of another top 10 draft pick, which we cannot let Trent Baalke just burn. And it's frankly depressing to be a Jags fan at the moment, Nick.
Well, Dom, it's always been depressing to be a Jags fan. I think if you ask any Jags fan, I think they'll tell you that. But, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is at fault for this Jaguars team. And I think he gets clowned a lot online, and I think that some of it is kind of fair. But what I want to draw your attention to is in the fourth quarter. Admittedly, it was garbage time. The game was over. He threw 3 touchdowns. That 2 were dropped. One was, I think, maybe either 2 drops and 1 was a penalty that was called back. It wasn't his fault. It's his team that's letting him down. In his career, he's had Urban Meyer and Doug Peterson as his head coaches. No one can succeed under those situations. And I do not believe that is his fault. I think he's worth the money. And I think that he's still a top 10 quarterback in this league, but he just needs proper coaching.
See, I'm a Trevor stan as well, Neil. I've defended him since the word go. I think people are waiting for Trevor to fail almost in that classic, first overall pick, was he worth it type conversation. But I do think, though, I kind of disagree with you here. I do think that Trevor Lawrence hasn't been playing good ball. He's been inaccurate with the football. He's overshot receivers multiple times this season. And whilst, sure, you correctly point out that the Jags had 4 drop touchdowns, but you also said yourself that was in garbage time. And yeah, Gabe Davis had a drop touchdown in the regular time in the end zone. They had to end up, I think, settling for a field goal, if I remember correctly. But that's kind of a wider metaphor of the problem, is that the Jags replaced Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis, which is a clear downgrade. And we knew that in the offseason. We saw that coming a mile off. Everyone said Calvin Ridley to Gabe Davis is a downgrade. Tank Bigsby is their best running back that the Jags have. He played 17 snaps on offense, while Ernest Johnson played 35. Like, the Jags are, you said it yourself, they're kind of playing against themselves, and I completely agree. But what I think separates this version of the Jags, i.e. the 2024 Jags, as opposed to the 2023 Jags, is that I do think that Trevor Lawrence isn't playing that good football. Last year, he was being absolutely killed by drops. And that is, to a degree, still true this game, and we saw it. And you rightly point out about the fourth quarter touchdowns that were dropped. But I don't think Trevor Lawrence is playing good football. And when your quarterback isn't playing good football, and a quarterback who we know to be a very talented, very capable quarterback, that suggests to me that there are problems at the core of this very team.
Yep, Dom, I think you're completely right. And the ownership, terrible draft picks in the last couple of years. I know we talked about it later and we'll talk about it previously, so I won't spend too much time on it. But really, I do think they're the worst team in the NFL, and I don't think it's that close.
I agree with you. I think the reason that they are the worst team in the NFL is because obviously there's a team who they're playing this week, the Patriots at Wembley. God, that's a cracker of a game,
howler,
isn't it?
Jesus
the
Christ.
NFL scripting always manages to give us some terrible games. Yeah. 2 1-5 teams battling it out. But the thing is that the Patriots have a spark of hope in Drake May. Did he bring the house down against the Texans? No, of course not. He was never going to be able to. But I still think he showed a flashes, I think, of what we can expect from Drake May in this offense, which is him actually being able to push the ball downfield, him being able to add a little bit of X factor to a pretty stale offense. The Jags don't have that spark. If they do not win against the Patriots this weekend, then they are officially the worst team in the NFL by record and otherwise. But I think you're right, Neil. I think forgetting about record, they are one of the most depressing teams. But that then brings us on then, New, to a team which you were very, very high on in one of our preseason episodes, which a few of our friends clowned you for. And at the moment, 4-2 is looking pretty good. But that's the Chicago Bears offense, New. What do you have to say about that?
You know, Don, we talked about that on the podcast a lot, but I really think you saw the X factor of Caleb Williams in this draft, in this game, and why he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He just creates stuff out of nothing, and he's only going to get better. Keenan Allen is I don't know how old he is, but he can barely move these days. He's got great hands, but this isn't even the best version of this offense that we have seen. The run game, DeAndre Swift has come alive. Rome Odunze is still not as involved as I would like, which I think is a separate issue for myself. But I really think the Bears are clicking all together, and they deserve the win despite how badly the Jags played.
I think what's scary about the Bears offense and what should scare the rest of the NFL is that Caleb Williams has looked better and better with every single game he's played. And I think it's a really, really good lesson for us on the pod as well, because I'm going to hold my hands up here. I'm guilty of being a little bit reactionary with the Bears, because I said that Shane Waldron needs to be fired after that disastrous 4th and goal play in week 2. And
it was a howler, though. It was a howler.
It was a howler. And everyone's saying, oh, you should pick a quarterback with the 2nd overall pick, because look at Jayden Daniels and look at CJ Stroud. Ridiculous. Miss me with that ridiculous argument. However, we've seen it since week 2, I think, really begin to click for this team. And I'm beginning to see the vision that Shane Waldron is building offensively in Chicago. And Caleb Williams, man, Jayden Daniels has been playing really well. But I cannot take that away from him. And we'll talk about Jayden Daniels a little bit later. But Caleb Williams is playing so well that the offensive rookie of the year is no longer a lock for Jayden Daniels.
Yeah,
that's how well those two quarterbacks play, and that's complementary to both of them. I'm not saying which one's playing better or worse, but they're both playing at such a high level that there, for me at least at the moment, there is not a clear-cut winner. Obviously, it's only been 6 weeks, but I think you're right that we're beginning to see the version of Caleb Williams. We're beginning to see the same version of Caleb Williams as we saw in college, him at USC, him creating plays. It's finally beginning to translate, beginning to click for him, and the more parts of his game that begin to click, the more deadly this Bears offense is going to become.
Yes, and Don, but to come back to what you said, I don't think you're actually wrong when you've pointed out the issues with coaching, because I do believe the issues with coaching are still there. I do not believe in Matt Eberflus as a coach that can take you to the promised land, that can take you to the Super Bowl. And I think Caleb Williams is playing for his job, quite frankly. I think the Bears would be better off with a better coach, similar to how the Bengals would be better off without Zach Taylor. A bad coach can be dragged by good talent, much as a bad team can be dragged by a good coach. It goes both ways. And I do slightly worry for the Bears because they've been such a dysfunctional franchise since they won a Super Bowl in '85. And I I do like the Bears. I think, Dom, I think you like the Bears. I think we're all a bit impartial to the Bears. And I want to see them succeed. They've never had a 4,000-yard passer. I hope Caleb Williams can be the first person to do that this season. But I'm just worried about their future because, like you see with the Giants, like you see with one of these playoff teams every year that goes 10-7, it can often be smoke and mirrors. And when the team actually finds their true level, they can often do a lot worse with a bad coach.
I think that's a decent shout from you there, Nu, because I agree. I think like coaches as well as players can be carried by a good team around them. But nevertheless, I think this Bears team is legit. And I think your very hot take at the beginning of the season, what was it, 12 and 5? 12 and 5?
Yeah, I kept on counting up the wins. I'm not sure if I'd still stick by that. But yeah, no, I said they'd make the playoffs.
And look, in the NFC North, where every single team has 4 or 5 wins, the best division in football at the moment, record-wise.
Top 4 point differentials, all the NFC North.
Yeah, crazy, man. Like there's some really good teams there. They don't look like the ugly duckling. And I think that's a massive testament to what the Chicago Bears are doing at the moment. And also I want to shout out as well that the Bears fans travelled so well for that game at Tottenham Hotspur. I spoke to people that were there afterwards. Unfortunately, I didn't get a ticket for this one. And they were saying that it was really loud all the time. The Bears fans travelled really well. There were fan events all week in London and the Bears fans really turned up for that. So they say that the Bears fans travel well, and we saw that in London, and it's great to see that American fans are willing to come over to London to watch the game. And while I really, really, really like the hodgepodge jersey wearing, I wear a random jersey. Well, it's not random for me, but I don't wear a jersey of the team that's playing. But increasingly, when I was there for the Minnesota Jets game, it was really a big, big contingent of Jets and Vikings. And apparently for the Bears, it was a lot of Bears and Jags. And I think that just makes the games a lot better in terms of atmosphere and in terms of having an actual home field advantage, quote unquote, for those teams that are actually playing that at home, which in this case was the Bears and was the Vikings. But then from one rookie quarterback to the other, Ravens versus Commanders. What did you think about this game?
Well, Dom, it was your radio debut, TalkSport 2, if you want to have a listen to it. I'm sure he'll be back again. I just want to say, Dom, it was absolutely amazing. Really well done.
Oh, thank you very much.
But no, back to the real thing at hand. Ravens Commanders, what a game. And I would not have called that from the start of the year. I was not high on Daniels. I was so on the Ravens. But the Ravens offense looks really, really good. And it's one of those things where I think us as fans and us as analysts, if you want to call us that.
No, we're analysts, man. Come on.
Overthink things. If a team is good and they add one thing to get better at the position they're good at, why would they get worse?
Yeah.
And I always fall into this trap. I think you fall into this trap. I think so many people fall into this trap of just thinking, Derrick Henry's old. He's still one of the best running backs in the league. Zay Flowers was a rookie last year. He's only getting better. I really think this Ravens team has a shot for a Super Bowl yet again.
Look, no, guilty as charged, man. I said it on air. I'm not too stubborn to admit when I was wrong. And on Derrick Henry, man, like you say, no, it was so simple. A team which absolutely loves like hard-nosed, ground and pound football, bringing in the biggest and one of the best running backs currently in the league, maybe arguably ever, is obviously going to help the team. Yeah. Like, look, I tried to be too smart with it. I tried to, think that I was smarter than everyone else. No, Derrick Henry, absolute beast. Like, genuinely, he's the king for a reason. And his stats, right? I think you're absolutely right to point out Lamar, Henry, and Flowers because those three killed the Commanders' defense. Lamar Jackson, 20 for 26, 323 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That 1 interception was because Mark Andrews just flipped it to the defense. So a misleading int, but nevertheless it's on there. And then Derrick Henry, 24 carries, 132 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. Zay Flowers, 9 receptions, 132 yards. Like, they eviscerated them. And this is the thing with the Ravens. And I wanted to call that game on TalkSport for a reason, because I really like what the Ravens are doing on offense. They're going for, and I've covered this on my TikTok as well, they are kind of zigging when the rest of the league is zagging. Like, they have, for the people listening, for when the Ravens are next playing, watch how many snaps fullback Patrick Ricard is on the field. what he offers them as a 300-pound, like 6'4" bowling ball, or wherever his height is, I know he's 300 pounds, is second to none. He can run block, he can pass block, he can run routes. And it means that the Ravens can either run or pass from essentially any formation. From the I formation, actually 3 plays in a row, which led them to their first touchdown. Patrick Ricard was on the field, either run blocking or pass blocking. And it can't be understated, despite those other 3 guys, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, all deservedly getting the limelight and getting their praise, which they do deserve. Patrick Ricard is like this henchman. I've seen another content creator, Anthony, describe him as like henchman of the week, like someone that just gets there, rolls their sleeves up, gets down and dirty, doesn't get the stat line, but does play a massive role in the win. And for me, the henchman of the week was Patrick Ricard, man. Like he allows the Ravens to do things that other teams simply can't do.
Yeah, Dom, and also look how often they line up from 3 tight end sets.
Yeah.
It's all the time, and it's impossible as a defense because normally you want to load the box, 10 in the box, make sure they can't run. That's a terrible idea against the Ravens. It's a bad day to be a defensive coordinator against the Ravens. But Dom, also to your point with they zig when our team zag, I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. Obviously, they've got, he's a special teams coordinator, John Harbaugh, a bit of a quirky position. But what they do is they just draft so well. I think even Nate Wiggins, who was a rookie in this game, he had a late PI call and he wears 2 mouth guards, which is disgusting.
Oh, I hate that.
I hate it. I think it looks terrible. Much like Garrett Wilson, no aura. Anyway,
where does that rank, Nude? 2 mouth guards or long sleeves?
Oh God, it's a howler. Like I think.
I think 2 mouth guards is worse.
I think 2 mouth guards is worse because it's just stupid. Anyway, what they do seems to be so revolutionary and groundbreaking, but it really isn't. They just make their team better and they build on their strengths every year instead of trying to reinvent themselves in this new whatever the offensive hype is. They're just a consistently good team and who are going to do consistently well for the next decade, I think.
And I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point with the drafting. But why they draft so well is because they draft players that fit what they want to do really well. Like Tyler Linderbaum. Is center a valuable position? No, not really. Is it valuable to the Ravens in their running game and what they want to do offensively? Absolutely. With someone like Carl Hamilton. Yeah. Carl Hamilton. Like he is a nickel 6'4". Like he played kind of traditional safety at Notre Dame almost, and they've made him more of a versatile Derwin James Swiss Army knife on the defense. And they also have their nose tackle and their defensive tackle have also dropped back into coverage. Some of the most in the NFL. Like what the Ravens do so well defensively is they rush 4. They only rush 4 guys. Their blitz rate isn't that high, but what they do to try and trick you is they're not the 4 guys that you're expecting. So, Kyle Hamilton will come in late. Maybe the cornerback, Marlon Humphrey, will come on a blitz. So it makes it very difficult. And actually, that kind of leads me on a little bit to Jayden Daniels and the offense, as I thought they upheld their end of the bargain really well. They put up 30 points against the Ravens defense. That's a really good outing. They didn't get the win. That's because their defense is absolutely abysmal. And they are the worst run defense in the league. And they went up against the best running game in the league. That was a foregone conclusion. So really, it was always going to be on Jayden Daniels' shoulders. Can you, in a boat race, keep up with Lamar Jackson and the weapons that he has? The answer was no, but it wasn't because Jayden Daniels showed that he was never capable of doing that or that it was miles away from doing it. They just couldn't afford to not score on every drive. And unfortunately, against a very good Ravens defense, they weren't able to. But I do think that the Commanders' offense did well to keep themselves in this game. And it was really just the fault of the defense. Yeah,
Dom, if you told a Commanders fan that by week 6, Jayden Daniels would be standing toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson and barely losing, they would have taken you they would have probably fallen to their knees crying in happiness. This is the best case scenario. Jayden Daniels, as you said, the rookie of the year race, Caleb Williams is still in it. And unfortunately, Neighbors, I think, might be out of it due to his concussion and missing a few games, so statistically, which ruins mine and yours bets, by the way. But that's
but we did say it was Caleb Williams' award to lose.
We did say that as well, but we
hedged.
I think we did, but I think Jayden Daniels is far exceeded expectations. He's so much further along than I thought he is. Some of the throws he's making, his deep balls, his ability to stand in the pocket, he looks like a pro out there. He doesn't look like a rookie.
Yeah. And I think that's what I underestimated with Jayden Daniels, really, is, first of all, I really underestimated Cliff Kingsbury. I do think there is a massive over-reliance on them throwing to one side of the field, which is the right side of the field. But he's making the job of his rookie quarterback as easy as possible. Now, obviously, that has negative connotations, but people have got to understand. Playing quarterback in the NFL is never easy. It's just about making it manageable for your rookie quarterback so that he can actually do stuff which it plays to his strengths. Like Jayden Daniels has, so I saw this really interesting thing about how there's 3 types of balls in the NFL. There's one, which is that Baker Mayfield, Justin Herbert piss missile, right? Like comes out like a laser beam. There's 2, which is that one which has to kind of float over the linebacker and drop into a bit of a zone. And then there's the 3rd, which is that Russell Wilson deep bomb when it comes off the screen and comes back on it. Jayden Daniels throws the best 2 ball in the NFL already. Like the touch that he can play, that he can put on some of his intermediate and deep passes is so good. And we saw it in this game multiple times. And there was a really nice deep shot to Terry McLaurin, which got broken up, but it was a perfectly placed ball. And Jayden Daniels, I think I underestimated that just like passing ability. Like, yeah, I think there were valid questions to ask Jayden Daniels of his style of play in terms of how often he would scramble and not look to pass, how he looks to protect himself when he's running, which again, we saw in this game. He took some big hits, but I think I definitely underestimated, first of all, his ability just to pass the ball well, essentially is what it boils down to. And also, I questioned if he could hit the middle of the field. And every week he's proven me wrong. But I do think, though, Nu, because you spoke about Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels, like, comparatively, I think that the comparisons are to Jayden Daniels and Lamar Jackson are unfair on both of them as quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah,
they're
not
electric
similar.
runners.
Yeah, they're not super similar.
No, I think as runners they're similar. Like you saw it with Jayden Daniels on one of the 3rd downs. Like you can't play man coverage against Jayden Daniels or Lamar Jackson because as soon as they see that the defenders aren't looking at him, he's going to run for that 3rd down. Right, as soon as the defense turns their backs, I'm gone. And that happened with Jayden Daniels here. But as passers, they're almost the opposite, really. Like Lamar Jackson is an intermediate, middle level of the field assassin. Like he just pings into Mark Andrews, to Zay Flowers, to Charlie Kohler, to Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, whoever it might be, right? Like those guys are like, well, we said it last week with the Bills, like they're almost all exclusively like slot players, basically, like tight ends and slot receivers. And look, and Jayden Daniels is almost the opposite. He's an outside the numbers, deep ball, go ball, just like bomb thrower, essentially. And so they almost play opposite styles in terms of the passing game, but they're the same level of athlete playing like almost opposite ways of quarterback, which is really, really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, Dom, the thing that's impressed me most with Daniels is that I thought he was going to do what all rookie quarterbacks do. Stand in the pocket for 1 second, first read isn't open, run out the pocket, and then, and is 80 kilos soaking wet, he's going to get middled and out for the season. That's what I thought was going to happen. But what I've been so impressed with is his ability to stand in the pocket. That touchdown to Terry McLaurin late in the game, he stood there for as long as he could and threw it. Had trust in his receiver, trust in his O-line, and it goes both ways. His receivers and his O-line trust him. And that's why I really think this team works on offense.
Yeah, completely. I mean, the Commanders, despite the loss, are a team which I think definitely I underestimated. I think a lot of people underestimated. And leading us on to our next game with a team like the Cowboys really spiraling. They should win that NFC East division, Nu.
I
but
agree.
Then, what did you think about the Lions and the Cowboys game?
Oh, it put a smile on my face, Dom. It put a smile on my face. I hate the Dallas Cowboys. And especially, I think Detroit Lions, everyone roots for the Detroit Lions, especially how they lost last season. In that 2-point conversion with the lineman, can you remind me his name? Who declared? He declared.
Dan Skipper.
Dan Skipper, yes. And what you saw today is how much the Detroit Lions absolutely despise the Dallas Cowboys. Normally, in Jerry world, once you got 30 points, backups in, HB dive, run down the clock. No, they were doing hook and ladders with Penei Sewell, 35 points up, and I was here for it. They wanted a lineman to score a touchdown so badly. I've never seen linemen get so many targets. They've probably got more targets than I have in my entire career as a receiver. That probably says more about my receiving ability, but that will draw a line under that. It was an absolutely perfect game from Ben Johnson. An absolute masterclass. Amon-Ra didn't even get a touchdown until they were 40 points up. This was a showing from every single person on their offense. Jameson Williams had a great game. David Montgomery had a great game. Jared Goff had a great game. They were there not just to win, but to humiliate the Dallas Cowboys. And they succeeded on Jerry Jones's birthday. And it couldn't make me happier.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions took the piss out of the Dallas Cowboys is how I would honestly sum up. Reverse flea flickers, hook and ladders to Penei Sewell, 6'6", £335 swing tackle Dan Skipper lined up out wide as a true wide out. Like, it was a humiliation ritual almost, like for the Cowboys at home, like you say, on Jerry Jones's birthday in Jerry World, to just be dispatched like that in that fashion was embarrassing, genuinely embarrassing. And I would say, Nu, that after this loss, the Cowboys are irrelevant. Yeah, they have injuries on defense, but the offense put up 9 points. 3 field goals. That's a worse showing than the Giants' offense the other day when they had 15 from 5 field goals. And we were complaining about that being a bad performance. And they had Neighbors and Daniel Jones. This team has CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. Like, they're incomparable as teams. And at the moment, the Cowboys are at this place where if they don't have elite performances from Dak and CeeDee Lamb, then they don't have a shot in games, and they're an incredibly unbalanced team at the moment. And they played a really balanced team in the Lions, and I think you can see the difference in those different play styles and team building and team management manifest itself on the field in a 47-9 blowout. Like, the opening drive, the Cowboys' offensive opening lineup was Ezekiel Elliott, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert, and Kevontae Turpin. That is a wholly unserious football team. I'm sorry. In the modern NFL, with corners being very athletic, very quick, defensive coordinators on the rise with people like Brian Flores, and people really kind of understanding how modern offenses are beginning to work, having one elite receiver doesn't cut it anymore. Yes, you obviously want CeeDee Lamb on your team, but you need someone else. Jalen Tolbert had a nice catch in this game. He is a wide receiver 4. Kevontae Turpin, a wide receiver 5. Like, it is an embarrassment to trot out those kind of players. Dak, 17 for 33, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pitiful. Ezekiel Elliott, 8 carries, 17 yards, 2.1 yards per carry. Diabolical. This team is bad, Nu.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Dom, the headline from the game will be about Aiden Hutchinson. And that was such a big part of the game, which is so annoying for Lions fans. It's annoying for me because I want people to be more about how bad the Cowboys are. But, Dom, that is a really, really serious injury. And, you know, I tried to watch the replay again, and it's horrid. It's absolutely horrid. And a fibia and tibia break, we haven't heard too much, but it looked like a pretty bad, almost spiral fracture. We'd have to ask Paddy. Can really, really set your career back entirely. Complete leg reconstruction is not something that you can do every single day to someone that could have won Defensive Player of the Year. You saw how much it meant to the team. You know, at the end of the game, Jared Goff said to the head coach, "You're our leader now." That's how big Aiden Hutchinson had an effect on this team. He was really their motivator, their engine, everything that the new Detroit Lions stood for. And now he's gone for the season. And I really am. I'm not worried because I still think they're a very good team, but they really need to bounce back from it.
This is a team also knew that was potentially in the mix for trading for a second pass rusher to actually try and give him some help, because they're a good run defense team, but they're not a good pass defense team. And they were already potentially in the market to get another pass rusher, trade for one, you know, really make a move, try and take that defense to the next level, which, whilst it's good and they're playing well, you need more weapons to play the teams that we're going to have to play later in the season. So to lose their best pass rusher, probably the best pass rusher in the league at the moment with how he's playing this season, is a massive, massive, massive loss. And you're right, Nu, the extra mojo he gives to that team and the style of football they play and how they want to win and what players they draft, like, they're all about the Lions at the moment, about like drafting homegrown talent and having them. And if you buy into the system, they reward you with a lot of money and playing time and all this. And to lose a player like that, the leader on the defense, is a massive, massive loss. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, Dom, I don't think I have anything more to say. You know, I prayers up for Hutch. Seems like a great bloke. And peace and love to the Lions. Come on.
But when we were talking about balance, you know, when I mentioned balance earlier, and I said that the Lions were a really balanced team and the Cowboys weren't, to give that some more context, is that the Cowboys are unbalanced because they essentially have empty calories. They got a lot of yardage, but it's not yardage that matters. Points matter. Like, they have drives to the red zone, which either then get turned over or they have to settle for a field goal. points matters. They're 27th in red zone efficiency. They have a negative turnover differential, and and that was going into this game. That's going to be well worse after this game. Could even be in the 30s with their red zone efficiency, and their negative points. The negative turnover differential is even worse. Flip to the Lions. They've got an incredibly balanced offense. They've got a great run game with Montgomery and Gibbs. Thunder and lightning approach. There's kind of like complementary styles of running. They've got big-bodied Tim Patrick. Don't know how they managed to get him the way they did it from the Broncos. I don't know why they got rid of him. They got the speedster Jameson Williams. They got the possession wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. They got a great O-line. They got a good quarterback, and they had their way with the Cowboys defense. And for me, it just shows balance versus unbalance, essentially.
Yeah, really well put, and good coaching versus bad coaching, which I think we'll touch on later.
Well, we're going to touch on it right now, Nu. We're going to touch on it right now. That brings us then to our final segment, which is Hot Seat, which, yes, is a repeat, as I said at the beginning. But trust me, we're going to have some very, very different names here. So on the topic, since we've just come off that game, Nu, I suppose you're not going to mention Dan Campbell on the Hot Seat?
No, I'm not, but I'll take a quick break from the L boys. Actually, let's pile it on. Mike McCarthy, get him out of here. He's terrible.
Show him the door.
Like, he's always been bad. Like, when he was hired, he wasn't good. Aaron Rodgers made this man's career. And no one in Green Bay, he was hated. Hired by the Cowboys thinking he's a different person than he is. And then he's still bad. He caps you at how good your team is. He does not raise the level of your team. I don't think he's a good leader of men, and I don't think he's a good play caller. I don't know why they hired him. And to let go of Dan Quinn, who's now succeeding so well at the Commanders, I think it was a grave mistake from the front office.
I couldn't agree more. That I would go even further. The hot seat needs to be the whole Cowboys front office. We've seen the Cowboys run it back too many times to literally no avail. And this was crazy. There were no off-season acquisitions, barring the old and washed Zeke Elliott and the old and washed Eric Kendricks. And they somehow were like, yeah, we're going to go back again, man. Why? With what has changed? Like, you've downgraded at running back by getting rid of Tony Pollard, and Eric Kendricks is not a difference maker on defense. And you have to, at this point, question the ownership, because Jerry Jones runs that team like a family business, and they're not getting results. If this was any other kind of line of work, the board would be meeting and they'd be forcing the owners to sell the company so that they don't run it into the ground. The Cowboys are washed as a team. They are irrelevant. And until something serious changes, nothing's going to change with this team, in the sense that, like, they're not going to be a bad team, the Cowboys. They'll finish with a above 500 record eventually, I think, but it's not going to be by very much at this rate, if at all. And they're playing the 49ers and the Eagles in the next 3 weeks, two NFC teams. If they come away with 3-0 in these next 3 games, think like heads have got to roll, but it's not enough just to get rid of McCarthy. Like, I think, talking about the Lions just a second ago, and losing Hutchinson, I don't think it's impossible, or improbable rather, that the Cowboys at least consider trading someone like Parsons to get draft capital from him while they can, because they're not going to compete now for the next couple of years. Let's be brutally honest.
Yeah, Dom, and like you talk about being an unbalanced team and an unserious team. If they paid Parsons what he should be owed, which be probably game-changing money, position resetting money, almost 50% of their salary would be going to 3 players. They can't afford to keep him, Lamb, and Prescott. And they've already gone in on Lamb and Prescott. They need to get rid of him. But for what? He's one of the best pass rushers in the league. But if it's a fire sale, everyone knows it. It massively drops his value. So I think it'd be really interesting to see, and I think they're in a really, really bad position as a team. And I put that all on Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones.
They're in a tricky spot, because they should probably get rid of Micah Parsons, but to do that would be to admit that you've screwed up, that you've backed yourself into a corner, and that heads are going to roll. So by doing that as a GM, it's Jerry Jones, so it doesn't quite work. But if it's any other GM, you're signing your death warrant with that trade. But that's really what should happen. And that's the problem, is Jerry Jones going to be too proud to admit that he's made some blunders, he's made some errors in how they've dealt with this whole thing, from the contracts with Dak and CeeDee Lamb and how they're dealing with Parsons now. I just think that things seriously need to change in Dallas, and the fans are going to begin to really turn on this team. I can only imagine the atmosphere in Jerry World as the Lions absolutely take it to you, and you just got to sit there in the stands and watch, because it wouldn't have been pretty. And the Cowboys, I think, definitely deserve to be in the hot seat. Who then is your next hot seat candidate?
Well, Dom, this is quite an easy one. It's a bit of a layup, but I'm going to go for Will Levis. God, he's
Oh, okay.
bad.
Yeah, nice. I like that.
He's like, I completely understand he was taken as a bit of a flyer, a developmental prospect. The best thing he did all game was tear a ball boy's ACL. He's not good at football. He's the best meme in the NFL, and I love it as a fan, as someone who uses Twitter, or X now it's called. Will Levis just provides entertainment. But as a Titans fan, you must be clawing your eyes out. He's not very good at football. That's the long and short of it. They trade away Malik Willis, who showed some promise in Green Bay now. Maybe Mason Rudolph's the future, but if that's your sentence, you're pretty stuck, aren't you?
I don't really know what happened to Will Levis, man. Like, he did show flashes last year, and he's just massively regressed. And I think that I'm not saying they're in the hot seat because they're a new regime, but like Bill Callahan and that new Titans regime, I'm a little bit wary of them, to be honest. Like, I don't really know what they're going to do now. At best, they're going to draft a quarterback this year. And then you've got quite a brutal combo of a defensive-minded head coach trying to train and coach up a rookie quarterback, which has never really had massive success in the NFL. So, and best case scenario is that rookie quarterback looks really good, and then that offensive coordinator gets poached, and they've got to learn a whole new playbook after 1 year. So I think it's interesting times in Tennessee. I don't think obviously the front office need to go. They need to just draft a quarterback and go from there. But I'm not feeling too confident about the regime in Tennessee. But that also then brings me on to one of mine, which is a bit of a layup as well, which is another AFC South team, which is the Jags. I think the whole Jags front office needs to go. I think head coach Doug Peterson needs to go. Press Taylor needs to go. Ryan Nielsen needs to go. Trent Baalke needs to go. Get rid of the whole lot. I think that if the Jags were coming home back to the States today, essentially, after the game, Doug Peterson would already be fired. And now they're in a situation where he's basically done and they can't get rid of him. And they're playing the joint worst team in the NFL. And we spoke about it earlier. They've at least got some hope. They've at least got some, a little bit of kind of potential spark on offense. They've got absolutely nothing, the Jags. They're a team which has rotted to the core. They're poorly built. They're poorly coached. Their season is over. They're done. It's a question of, is the regime going to get fired now, or is it going to get fired later? So due to some technical issues, you've got the pleasure of having a solo pod from Dom Corbs for the last final minutes of this podcast. But what New wanted to say was some malarkey about Ndamukong Suh. Will the Jags play for their team? He's not here, so he doesn't get to say it. Sorry, New. But my last two hot seat candidates are Brian Dable, the Giants head coach, because I don't think he should be, because Daniel Jones lost this Giants team this game. He threw an interception in the red zone when Tyrone Tracy Jr. was wide open in the flat. If anyone should be on the hot seat, we already know who it should be. It's Daniel Jones, and I'm sure he is. And finally, Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach. His job was saved by narrowly avoiding a very humiliating loss to the Cleveland Browns, and him getting booed at home is absolutely not a good sign for the safety of his job. He's a CEO head coach who brings stability. He's not an X's and O's guy. He's not a leader of men. So what the hell does he do? There's clearly some issues with him and Jalen Hurts, with how they interact with one another. If we cut to 2 seasons ago when Sirianni was like waving goodbye at the flags and at the away fans, and Jalen Hurts had to like come and put his arm down and say, don't do that. Like, he is, I think, a very odd character. And I think there's some bubbling issues in Philadelphia. And that then brings us to the end of this episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, subscribe, give it a like, leave a comment. Me and New look at all of them. We really appreciate your support. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, well, just Spotify. Actually, I don't upload to Apple Podcasts. If you are listening on Spotify, then please do give us a follow. I will be at the Giants-Eagles game in MetLife Stadium this Sunday. So me and New are going to pre-record a Heisman special episode, which hopefully will go live next week instead of a Week 7, I believe, is next week review. So there won't be a Week 7 review because I won't be here, but we will hopefully still be able to put out an episode. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. If he's on the screen, that's been your co-host, Nick Corbs. This has been our Week 6 NFL review. I hope you've enjoyed. We'll catch you on the next episode.